Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hello and welcome to the April 2023 event of Newcastle Institute. This event is live streamed on Facebook, and then the recording goes on to our website and onto YouTube. I'd like to welcome all of you who are here in person, and also a special welcome to those who are watching live. Wherever you might be. We know we have a regular group of viewers in Brisbane, in Melbourne and in Canberra. So welcome to you all. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I'd like to say just one or two things. Firstly, Newcastle has been a place of learning for thousands of years. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we sit, the Awabakal and the Warramai peoples, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to acknowledge all those who continue to make Newcastle a place of learning and a place of discovery, a place where sharing ideas leads us to new ways of thinking and new ways of doing. We know that people hunger for rational discussion of diverse ideas that rise above the noise of tabloid journalism and party politics. I'd also like to just pay my respects to two community leaders, two great community leaders who were champions of the disadvantaged, who passed away recently. Dr. Yunupingu earlier this month, and Father Bob Maguire, a champion of the poor. We've been fortunate to have some outstanding people as our guests here at Newcastle Institute. Many of you may recall Kevin Rudd at the end of last year, speaking on Australia's role in the Asia Pacific. Later this year, Arthur Sinodinos, who has just retired as Australia's ambassador to the United States, will be here reflecting on his life as a public servant, as a politician, and in the private sector, and reflecting on Australia's relationship with the United States. We hope to have a huge announcement about another guest later in the year who will also speak on Australia's role in the Asia Pacific, and I'd ask you to stay tuned for details of that as we can announce it and they get confirmed. But our guest tonight is Tim Costello. Tim is a lawyer and a Baptist minister. Tim was elected Mayor of St Kilda Council in 1993 and became well known for championing the cause of local democracy and for his clashes with the then Premier of Victoria, Jeff Kennett. Jeff Kennett attacked Tim for being un-Victorian, for speaking out against the gambling-led recovery of the state, and referred to Tim as that leftist cleric. Tim's political career ended when his mayoral position was abolished, along with the whole of St Kilda Council, in Jeff Kennett's reform and consolidation of local government in 1994. Tim was then CEO of World Vision and was also elected as a delegate at the Australian Constitutional Convention in Canberra in February 1998. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, he has been frequently seen on Australian national media commenting on gambling and other social problems. A National Trust poll in 2014 elected Tim one of Australia's 100 national living treasures. Tim's topic tonight is "We live in a community, not an economy." After Tim has spoken, there'll be time for Q&A, so listen carefully and have some good questions ready. Would you please join me in welcome Tim Costello.
Well, thank you for that welcome. A delight to be here. I've been coming to Newcastle for over 30 years, and it really is the best kept secret in Australia. And as a person who lives on the bay, Port Phillip Bay, and enjoys swimming right through winter, 8 degrees. I hope it's good for me because it's bloody cold. I do envy watching dolphins this morning next to Noah's, surfing the waves next to surfers, and the heat of your water and the beauty of your city, and it's a delight to always come. I should, of course, acknowledge the local elders, custodians of this land, and their leaders past, present and emerging. So maybe if I just start by saying that National Trust 100 National Living Treasures honour was one of the sort of odd things about Australia. The National Trust, unbeknownst to me, had a survey in the paper asking people to name their 100 National Living Treasures. And I got rung up. I remember it was April Fool's Day, and they said, "You have been voted one of the 100 National Living Treasures." And I laughed and thought it was a joke. They said, "It's not." And they said, "We've had surveys, people have voted, it's been in the paper." I remember saying to them, I didn't see any of the surveys. And since, 23 years since, I've actually never met anybody who voted, now that I think about it. But who am I to distrust the media, So they had a big do at Sydney Town Hall, black tie. John Howard, Prime Minister, was introducing us. Gough and Margaret Whitlam were there. Don Bradman, I wanted to meet him, and Dawn Fraser. And so we're on stage, introduced by John Howard. We had to go to a table that was allocated, and we didn't know which table. Neither did the people, who I later discovered had paid $1,500 a ticket to sit at one of the tables with one, how many, 100 tables? One of Australia's National Living Treasures. Well, words fail me describing the looks on people's faces when I approached the table and they'd realised they'd paid $1,500 to have dinner with me. There they were, hoping at least for Kylie Minogue, she was there. If not Kylie, well, they'd settle for Ray Martin, and they got Tim Costello. So I've always kept that particular honour in its perspective. It really was just a fundraiser for the National Trust. So look, this topic tonight, most of you who are my age or around that age remember different conversations and different ways of seeing the world. I remember when it really hit with me that we were losing the community aspect and we were becoming just an economy and a market. I had taken my 3 kids when they were young to McDonald's. I don't like McDonald's, but my kids at that stage didn't particularly like being seen in public with me. If I was taking them to McDonald's, that was going to be a deal. There we were with my 3 kids. And the girl at the counter had a name tag on. Her name was Karen. I'd got the kids' orders. They were all standing there. So as she's busying herself, I thought, I'll do what I remember my father used to do. We used to stop at service stations where someone used to serve you. Remember those days? And Dad, and I was impressed by this as a kid, he'd always have a conversation as the guy checked the oil and maybe the air and and he'd always find a way to connect. My dad was a teacher, a story, a point of interest. And I remember as a young kid watching and thinking, it's really impressive, total stranger. How does he know how to talk to him? How does he actually do that? And it's shaping me. Well, I had my kids there, and I said to the young woman with the name tag on, Karen, I said, are you having a good day? I said to her. She said, yes. I said, oh, sorry, you don't know my name, I know yours. My name's Tim. Karen sort of looked a bit surprised, and I kept going. I said, so do you work in this McDonald's full time, or is there a career for you? You're going to be managing it one day, Karen? She warmed up. She said, no, I'm a musician. All musicians are poor. I work here just to pay the bill so I can do my music. I thought, this is good. Karen's warming up. I'm modelling something of my father. I turned around just to make sure my kids were absorbing this modelling. Well, my kids had disappeared. They were gone. I got the food. I went out and sat down. I'd barely sat down before my daughter turned on me. She said, "You are so embarrassing." I said, "Why?" She said, "You're not meant to talk to her. You're not meant to tell her her name. You're so embarrassing." And I got a bit defensive. I said, "Okay, well, if I'm not meant to talk to her and I'm not meant to tell her my name, why do I know her name? Why has she got a name tag on?" My daughter explained to me as if I was really slow. She said, "Look, she's got a name tag on so that if she stuffs up, you know who to report." And I was quite taken aback. I thought, isn't this interesting? We're looking at the same thing, a name tag, but we're now attaching quite different meanings. I think it's about community, and this is a commercial exchange, but it's more. We're living in community. We're sharing aspirations and dreams. Karen had warmed up and was telling me. My daughter's looking at it and she's going, no, not her language, but it was called total quality management. The customer, has to be served and has a right to complain, and that way we sell a whole lot more because we have a lot of happy customers. Same name tag, completely different vision. I'm also a reverend, and over my time, I've seen the church change. The church, I have to say, is fantastic for training people. When people would often say, "How did your brother dominate question time?" I'd tell him church youth group. And even outdoor preaching. And we learned to communicate from the age of 12 or 13. You were speaking, you were engaging, you were leading, you were involved with Sunday school. You developed skills. Well, what's changed with church? It's increasingly, certainly in big churches, become much more performance-oriented. The best band up the front, often with smoke machines, and the best singers, and very professionalised, and often selling millions of dollars of music, and quite extraordinary, ways of motivating and getting people to give and to keep the show on the road. I thought how interesting it is when you go into a shopping centre today. Many shopping centres are now built like ancient temples. Have you noticed this? Big arched entrances. Often there's music playing in the store to calm you. And you've had ringing in your ears the message, there's something missing in your life. Advertisers advertise profoundly to say, you ought to be dissatisfied with the way you are, with the way you look, with your body weight. Who is happy with their body weight? You ought to feel that something is missing. And then they don't just preach a message of, if you like, sin, which is you've failed, you've missed the mark, you should be dissatisfied. They preach a message of salvation. But in the shopping centre, in this store, the brand, the look, the purchase, it can complete you. It can make you feel better. You can actually, we might call it retail therapy, but you can actually say, my life is going to flourish. That's what the good news says. It's interesting that when you go up to shop assistants, they're almost like ministers, priests, pastors. They will say, here, taste, try on, feel this. And when you try it on, like a priest, they'll give you a blessing. They'll say, wow, you look terrific. That makes all the difference. Wow. And you're going, I found what's missing in my life. It's true. And a bit like church, when the plate goes round, you hand over your money to the shopping assistant priest. And as you're about to leave, they always give you the benediction. Have a nice day. And you walk out going, whatever's missing in my life, I found it. Well, I could go on with a lot of analogies. Once the sense of being in community, which was a public good for its own sake. Sharing, knowing we're all fragile humans just trying to get by, increasingly is taken over by markets, by commercial opportunities, by messages, by transactions that really don't have much to do with community. My dad wasn't talking to the service station guy filling up his tank because he was going to get a discount. It was genuine. We're fellow citizens. We're sharing this sometimes veil of tears together. We're sharing the load together. And civility and courtesy and being in community is how we walk this veil. That's the valley. That's how I understood it. My kids, whether it's the McDonald's, whether it's the shopping centre, it's a very different metaphor. Who primarily are we? Where are our primary organic connections? How do we think of things? We all know, and I can give this speech, but you've heard many times, that the measures we've concocted are all about economics. Instead of having gross national progress, how safe are we? How's our health? What are we investing in preventative care? How are we overcoming loneliness? We have a gross national income, right? And if that goes up, we all assume we must be better off. Of course we know Robert Kennedy famously made a speech like this, that when there's a pollution spill or a car accident or a crime, it creates increases in the gross national income. But who wants those? The gross national income is helped, and economic activity is helped by things that actually we deplore, which are bad. When we actually want to measure well-being and connectedness and community, there aren't any measures. The things we measure matter, and we're measuring the things economically that don't have to do with what we know deep down really matters. We're not walking alone. There are others. We can take time to hear their story, carry the load, take an extra few steps that they need us to take with them so that they know that they matter. Most humans really only have one question. That question is, do I matter? That's really the question that drives all of us. And when there's courtesy and kindness, particularly from a stranger, from a community, it is so important. It's liberating. Well, I give that introduction because we happen to be at the South Leagues Club. I'm sure it's a fine club, but there are a whole lot of pokies down there. Let me tell you of 25 years, and this is my public policy piece tonight, that pokies, starting in 1956, the only two places in the world that had legal pokies was Las Vegas and Sydney. Las Vegas was run by the mafia and the mob. Sydney, well, you be the decider. We like to say in Victoria, New South Wales politics has been rotten since the Rum Rebellion. That's a bit of a slight, but, well, what happened in 1956 was state governments of both sides didn't have to pay for community. State governments never like paying. Have you noticed that? They said, we'll get community on the cheap through the pokies that we particularly put in new green space, particularly in western suburbs. They will create the community because you'll get a cheaper lasagna or parma or schooner and we won't have to pay. Now, that didn't hurt much when it started. because the pokies back then were one-armed bandits where you could only put in a 2 shilling 2 bob piece. You can't do a lot of damage putting in a 2 bob piece. But what happened was 2 things in the 1990s. The first thing was it moved from mechanical machines to digital machines. It moved, therefore, from having to pull, which is mechanical, to the most brilliant programs, programmed by the most brilliant, well-paid psychologists to make the programs addictive and attractive, and where now you can load up $10,000 in one go in a machine. Forget putting 2 bob in that didn't do much damage. $10,000 in notes in a machine. And the second thing that happened was Bob Carr, under the influence of the AHA, made the foolish decision to extend pokies from clubs to pubs. At least in a club you have to sign in. There's some sort of restraints. They're not great, but anyway. Pubs, there's none of that. New South Wales has 40% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. Can I say that figure again? 40% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. New South Wales is the belly of the beast. And it started out by saying, we're going to create community. That was, and it sort of continues, well, doesn't our club give a little bit away? Let me tell you, they give less than 1% away. They get it all back because they're not for profit. When a club tells you they're being generous, laugh in their face. That's why so many clubs, particularly in Sydney, have indoor rainforests, gold taps and gold bathrooms. CEOs paid $1.5 million. You show me CEOs of not-for-profit on $1.5 million. They're regarded as charities, not-for-profit. Execs on $1 million. Surreal things like play centres next to the pokies. Utterly, this is an adult addictive product. Well, I started on this journey. I shared this last night, so I'll make it very brief, with a woman who came into my legal office who was middle-aged, didn't smoke or drink when pokies were introduced in 1992. We got the digital ones. She got addicted. She stole over 60 grand from her employer. I represented her as her lawyer. She got 4 years jail. I remember visiting her in prison and sitting in prison asking myself this question: how does a middle-aged woman who doesn't smoke or drink, who has never been in trouble with the law before, end up in jail for 4 years? Out of asking that question, I started to investigate these machines. I wrote a book called Wanna Bet. I started with the assumption that we have the most pokies in the world in Australia. 75% of the world's pokies in pubs and clubs are in Australia, 40% in New South Wales. Going, well, of all people, we just love to gamble more. It's in our DNA. We're baptised into eucalyptus oil and a punt. That's what it means to be Australian. I discovered, researching this book, that the Kiwis, Irish, Chinese, English, the list goes on, all claim to be the greatest gamblers in the world. This notion that it's particularly a cultural love of Australians is complete nonsense, utter BS. We have the greatest gambling losses in the world. Not only are the greatest gambling losses per head in the world, they're 40% higher losses than the nation that comes second. That's how utterly damaging it is. Because we have the most irresponsible policies in the world, nothing to do with culture. And where did it all start? It all started with the need for community. That was and continues to be the justification. Well, after writing that book, I convinced a person you might have heard of, he was Treasurer of Australia, happens to be my brother, to have an inquiry, a Productivity Commission inquiry into pokies. I remember a moment in the conversation when I was convincing him to do it, when he said, "Are you sure you really want this?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, whenever the Productivity Commission looks into something, its usual answer and solution is less red tape, more competition, more market forces." I took a deep breath and said, "Yes, I still want this." That's what productivity commissions do if they look into textiles or shoewear or any manufacturing. More, let it rip. Well, this productivity commission was the one that found we have the greatest gambling losses, the most pokies. Its figure, which was staggering, and it was only in a footnote, 42.3 cents in every dollar going through a poker machine comes from someone addicted. That figure now is 62%. 62% of every dollar going through pokies comes from someone who's addicted. And the Productivity Commission said, this is out of control. They recommended in 1999, you might have heard of this term, the cashless card. Have you heard of that? Just had an election. Dom Perrottet, I'll get to how courageous he was on this. Nothing happened because the states were so hooked on the revenue. State governments were getting development and community on the cheap. Now they're getting billions into Treasury from those 62%, mostly in the poorest postcodes, from addicted people. And then in Easter last year, Dom Perrottet said some words that amazed me. He said, at Wesley, their Easter breakfast, as treasurer, I loved seeing the revenue flowing in from the pokies, but I feel really bad. People are pouring their lives and their savings down the pokies. I've never heard a premier speak like that. I didn't expect it to come from Dom Perrottet because I tried to save his gaming minister, Victor Dominello, who'd recommended the cashless card just earlier, from being sacked. New South Wales clubs demanded his scalp. The cashless card, just so you understand it, if you hadn't followed the last election on this, now recommended by two Productivity Commission reports, by the way, my brother's 1999 and then Kevin Rudd's in 2010. Same recommendation, pull this back, get this under control. I had rung Dom Perrottet for the first time when Clubs New South Wales demanded that Victor Dominello, who recommended the cashless card, be sacked. And Dom said to me, Tim, I can't stand up to New South Wales clubs, they're too powerful. I said, if I talk to Chris Minns, opposition leader, now Premier, and see if he would say, the cashless card at least should be explored. Victor hasn't committed any crime recommending what two productivity commissions have recommended. He said, if Chris Minns can give support, I could save Victor Dominello. Rang Chris Minns. Chris Minns said, Tim, when Julia Gillard tried to bring it in, look what happened to her. A hysterical campaign. It was called the Un-Australian campaign. Clubs, AHA mobilised their people and said, nanny state, you're interfering with our rights. Tim, we will never take on New South Wales clubs. Victor Dominello lost gaming for recommending what two Productivity Commission reports had recommended to stem what's happening. So the Easter after that, having failed to save Victor Dominello, I was very surprised. Dom Perrottet started talking about people pouring their life savings down, about it hurting the poorest, about the machines being built for addiction. Well, I've been saying that from the book I wrote, over 25 years ago, Want to Bet. But to hear a Premier in New South Wales say it, that was extraordinary. The next thing Dom Perrottet did, which was equally extraordinary, he refused, the first Premier or leader of the opposition for decades, he refused to sign an MOU with Clubs New South Wales. 3 months out from an election, opposition leader and Premier forever here in New South Wales have signed a memo with Clubs New South Wales that whoever wins, they will not change any regulation about pokies. They will not change any tax about pokies. This is how profoundly captured the state is. After talking to Perrottet and Chris Minns by the way back then, I remember getting off the phone and turning to my wife and saying, I have just had the Premier and the opposition leader both tell me, with fear and quaking, who actually runs the state. That's what they both were telling me. Not the community, but a market. And this is a very predatory market. Well, Perrottet was right in what he was saying, because back in 2012, Josh Landis, sacked during the election campaign by New South Wales clubs when he made a sectarian attack on Perrottet. He said it's his Catholic gut that's making him do this. Totally wrong. But if anything, the Catholics hadn't been loud supporting reform because of Catholic pokies clubs. Dooley Lidicum Club and a few others. Labor, of course, were totally against it because Labor have over 40 million tied up in Labor pokies clubs. But Perrottet was absolutely right, because in 2014, Josh Landis and Anthony Ball, now CEO of Aristocrat, that makes the pokies, was the CEO of New South Wales Clubs, went to an NRA conference in Los Angeles, National Rifle Association. There they were taught, guns don't kill, people kill. Never blame the gun. Always put the full responsibility on people. They came back and they sold to the New South Wales government a slogan you might have heard of. It's called Gamble Responsibly. Heard of that? That came from New South Wales clubs, straight from the NRA. And that was such a devastating, clever slogan, because it said, most of us are responsible. There's a few pathetic individuals who blame the individual. No, the machine is programmed for addiction. Let me explain how. Just two things. One is called near misses. When you push a button on a poker, you have won and lost in that nanosecond. But what happens over the next 5-10 seconds is up comes one pyramid, up comes two in a line, up comes the third, up comes the fourth. You just need the fifth pyramid for the jackpot. The dopamine's released, it hits the pleasure center of the brain with the force of cocaine. That's what MRI studies from Massachusetts to Cambridge have shown, what happens when you're sitting in front of the machine. And guess what? The fifth pyramid, which is to be the jackpot, is always just above the line or just below the line. So close that time. It's called a near miss. It's absolute BS. It's programmed to release the dopamine. You lost in that instant. The other thing is losses disguised as wins. If you play the pokies, you can play many lines. Say you're playing 6 lines, you're down on 5 lines, you're way down. You have a win on 1 line that you're playing. Off goes the jackpot noises, the sounds. You're still way down. You've lost. What is it doing that noise for? To release the dopamine. The machine is to blame, like the gun is to blame. Sure, people have to be responsible and humans pick up guns. So in my conversation after last Easter with Dom Perrottet, I said, you know what, tongue-in-cheek, I believe in America's Second Amendment. Dom was a bit surprised. He said, you do? I said, yeah. The right to bear guns. Yeah, I believe in it. I believe, given when the Second Amendment was written, every American has a right to carry a ball and musket rifle. Not a semi-automatic. Not a pistol. Dom got it immediately. He said, of course. So regulation hasn't kept up with technology. Machines that were mechanical and paying in a harmless way for community and clubs, in green space, government saved the money, suddenly are literally predatory, releasing the dopamine, doing huge damage. The last little piece in this, which was fascinating, was just before Victor Dominello lost the gaming ministry. He did something under the nose of his Liberal colleagues, which they missed. He commissioned the New South Wales Crime Commission to look into the link between pokies and crime. It took 12 months. It was under the radar. It released its report last October. The report found billions of dollars of dirty money going through suburban city pokies. Suddenly the game had changed. The industry's argument always was, well, you don't have to play the pokies. And that's true. It's a bit hard to argue against that, isn't it? But when there's billions of dollars of dirty money, it means the drugs being sold to your kids or grandkids, the hot goods burgled from your home, you go and play the pokies, you get a check, the police can't touch you for your unexplained wealth, billions of dollars. Suddenly, the whole community is getting affected. Out comes the New South Wales Police Commissioner recommending a cashless card. First recommendation of 8 of the New South Wales Crime Commission, a cashless card. 2 productivity commissions, and Gillard tried and got defeated in 2010 to introduce it, a cashless card. Well, Greens, Teals, Independents stood up straight away, going, absolutely. Dom, without breaching confidences, basically didn't have the support of his party. The Nationals, he regarded, rightly so, as sort of wholly owned by clubs, New South Wales and the AHA. See, pokies in New South Wales is a business of $95 billion turnover a year. Let me say that figure again, $95 billion. That buys a lot of media. That buys politicians. That buys extraordinary campaigns if a party stepped out of line. When Dom refused to sign the MOU, Chris Minns then had to refuse to sign the MOU with Clubs New South Wales. I have no doubt, because I think the Libs the coalition were always going to lose here, 12 years, lots of scandals, tired, whatever, that Labor, being a minority government, is because they refuse to offer bipartisanship on the cashless card. The Greens' preferences that normally flow so strongly to Labor are exhausted because Greens were for the cashless card and Chris Minns wasn't. Still terrified of New South Wales Club. Same with Independents, same with Teals. It should have been a thumping Labor majority because of 12 years of Tide and John Barilaro scandals and all sorts of things. Incredible, it's a minority government. Missed out on majority by 2 seats, which means that reform is still alive. Now, I've done Channel 10 today on Star Casino, having to lay off people. I said I'm sorry for the 500 jobs lost, but the Royal Commission found the Star Casino's business model was built on crime and predatory gambling practices. Of course, if the regulator now regulating that is doing their job, there's going to be jobs that go. But it's also going to mean lives that are saved. I've done 6 funerals of people who've taken their lives from gambling, pokies addiction, the shame, the silence. I was irresponsible. All my fault. Me, turning inwards. Well, yes, people have to be responsible. I don't deny that. But these machines are built. It's the argument of Americans. Oh, guns are fine. People just have to be responsible. No, there's too many guns. In this state, with 40% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs are in every 3rd block, it means, unlike most of the world where pokies are in casinos, which I don't have a problem with, when you go to a casino, it's destination gambling. It's a different business. You intend to gamble, You have a meal, intend to get home, you know you got to get home. Because they're on every third or fourth block, pubs with pokies or clubs, you are only going to shop. You've got half an hour left on your meter. There's the venue. I'll just go in. It's accessibility. 40% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. Accessibility that creates the losses, addiction, crime, which is so damaging. Well, I don't even know what the time is, but I've been talking for a while. Let me just finish by saying I started big picture. I could give you a whole lot of stuff about markets versus community. But gambling, for me, has really been an example of starting with pokies to build community, a good thing, the thing we love, and how market literally has taken it over, destroyed it, led to crime and so many other things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Lots to think about. Now it's your turn. We've got some roving microphones. Just put your hand up and we'll have a question. Well, there's a question over there. Whilst we're just getting the microphone, I remember, Tim, when I was at university studying, one of the things I tried to study was psychology. And we had at Sydney University, we were given a rat, and I had to teach the rat how to count. That was my task. Could I teach a rat to count? And I discovered that I could. I would starve the rat for 2 days or so, and then if he went near this little lever to start with, he'd press it and he'd get a little bit, or she, I didn't know, but I did call the rat Bentley. I thought, you've got to give a rat a bit of class here. So he'd press the lever and a little food would come out, and he'd run up to the other end of the cage and get the piece of food. And then we worked out, look, I wonder if I could choose a random number, say 5, and I won't give him any food until he presses the lever 5 times. And I was amazed how quickly the rat would learn to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, turn around, run to the other end, wait for the food. I thought that was just staggeringly amazing. The next thing we did was to say, I wonder how many times he would press it if he didn't know when he was going to get the food. What we used to call random reinforcement. Might happen after 1 press, it might not happen until 20, and then how long would a rat press the button waiting for the food? And the sad thing is the rat would press the food until it dropped from exhaustion. If it was random reinforcement waiting for the food to come out at the other end. And I've often thought that's a bit like a poker machine. You're not sure when you're going to win. If you knew you had to press it I don't. If you had to press it 5 times and you won, well, what's the fun in that? But this rat would press that little lever until it dropped on the bottom of the cage from exhaustion. If it didn't know, the next press might be the one that's going to win. Is that, I'm guessing that's...
Yeah, I should stand up. You know, the random theory is absolutely what pokies are built on. So you didn't understand perhaps the connection, but psychologically is exactly what's going on.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, hi Tim, thank you for that. That was fabulous. My question is, this strange little tiny trial that Labor said that they were going to run to you know, whatever they're, I can't remember the details of it.
500 machines, yep.
Is there any chance that it might actually get a useful result, and might they then have to act on it?
No. So this trial was written by Clubs New South Wales and handed to MINS to pick, 20 machines here at South and 10 down wherever, and say, for these machines, you've got to get a cashless card to play. Firstly, no crim's going to do it. What the cashless card does is it requires you to, if you're going to play the pokies, to have a card which you get by showing your identity linked to a debit account, not a credit account. No crim will ever reveal their identity. So the cashless card immediately gets rid of crims. The second thing it is, before you can start playing, you have to set limits. Before you're in the zone, and all people who develop harm talk about a zone. They'll say, when I'm in front of that machine, all my anxieties, all my worries, all my problems go. It's quite extraordinary. It's a drug. It really is extraordinary. I lose all track of time, all track of money. This is, Well, the card requires you to set your limits beforehand. It's been running in Norway since 2017 with terrific success. Last year, Tasmanian Liberal government, backed by Labor, said we're bringing in the cashless card. It's happening. We've had 10 trials, real trials in Australia. They all work. The idea of picking 500 machines, 10 here at South, some there, and saying, firstly, no creme will get a card. Secondly, no person who actually has harm from gambling will get a card because of the stigma of asking for one. So the notion that it will show anything is a nonsense. Where our hope lies is Alex Greenwich and the Greens and the others who are going. I was with Alex 2 weeks ago. We're going to make this happen. That's really what it is. So Men's all saying he's got a mandate. He'll have to run his little trial, and But we're ready. We're ready.
Hi, thanks, Tim. Thanks for sharing your insights. I think of America and the gun lobby, and we hear one of the senators boast about their 2-year-old with a gun collection, and we see what's happening with the clubs and poker machines in Australia. Do you think there is any capacity within any of our parliaments across the nation for moral courage? Because we, at my age, I think, where is the hope for the future of our nation when our leaders are so much without that moral courage, or even a moral compass? You have to ask, is there a moral compass in anybody anymore? Because we see it played out, because community is going to be the salvation of this nation, and not the money coming out of poker machines or being poured into them, or clubs.
Yep. So Dom Perrottet is the first leader I have seen showing that moral courage. A year ago, if you said to me, a Premier in New South Wales is going to suggest the cashless card, I would have laughed in your face, because you are the belly of the beast here. I wasn't surprised, though I was really pleased, that Tasmania went first. They have got far fewer machines. They said, we're going to do it. I thought, that's amazing, and Labor backed it. They're in opposition. But in New South Wales, I would have said, that's ridiculous. Without breaking confidences, Perrottet literally had to put his leadership premiership on the line, literally with a threat to the Libs and Nats. You might go into this election without a leader and you will all lose if you don't back this. That's moral courage. He knew it's not going to win them an election. And, if he was Gladys Berejiklian, who everyone loved, he might have had a chance, but he was Dom Perrottet. He did this out of conviction. It was moral courage. Extraordinary moral courage. The Sunday, he was calling a cabinet that night to get it through. He was talking to me, and he wasn't sure he was going to be Premier. That's courage. Is there anyone else? So we have now some progress in the federal sphere. So the feds control sports betting under the communications power of the minister is Michelle Rowland. I convinced a Labor backbencher, Peter Murphy, her name is, she's my neighbour and my member, to ask Albo about a House of Reps inquiry into online gambling, and she got a yes. She chairs it with Keith Wallahan, the Liberal. It has been extraordinary. The CEO of Sportsbet had to admit they have banks and banks of staff looking at every bet. If a person is winning, They slow them down. If they're winning too much, they block them and stop them. If a person is losing, they give them a bonus. If they haven't taken up the bonus, within an hour they up the bonus. He had to admit this. The AFL and NRL, of course, rocked up and said, oh, no, it's all fine and everybody's happy and we've got the balance right. And sadly, what's happened for our sport, and we love our sport, is the sports betting companies have gone upstream and they literally own the sport now. The AFL gets a clip on every sports bet. They're the sponsor for AFL. Every bet that's made, they get a clip. They get $15 million for the sponsorship of the stadium. And the TV rights, which Channel 7 won, will be paid for by a greater tsunami of sports bet ads coming for AFL. I'm more aware of AFL than NRL, but NRL is as bad, if not best, at worst. The Premier League in the UK, don't know if anyone saw this week, just banned any sports bet ads on the jerseys. Only on the front, yeah, but at least on the sleeve you can't see it from the ground, but it is a bit ridiculous. It was only on the front. The point about this is both AFL and NRL, the House of Reps inquiry just 2 weeks ago said, we're not the regulator. This might have died. We're not the regulator. We're a not-for-profit. I love the way they keep saying we're a not-for-profit. We don't know what Gil McLachlan, the CEO of AFL, is paid because they won't reveal it. But his predecessor, Andrew Demetria, was on $3.9 million a year. Gil is certainly on more than that. We're just a not-for-profit, he said. All the money goes back into the sport. He's got 10 execs who report to him, all on more than $1 million. Not-for-profit. Same with, these clubs like Canterbury Leagues and Penrith, same 1.5 million CEOs. Well, what they said at the House of Reps inquiry is, we're not the regulator. We shouldn't have to move. We don't have to move. It's up to the government regulation. What was so interesting about the Premier League in Great Britain moving is they're way ahead of the regulator. They have said this is influencing kids. This is capturing kids as a future fodder for the gaming market. In Melbourne, don't know the figures in Sydney, we have 943 sports bet ads a day on free-to-air TV. 943. 10-year-old kids know the logo, the odds, they know the jingles, they talk in terms of the odds. This is an adult product. And the industry will say it's legal. Well, yeah, and unfortunately in my state, brothels are legal. You don't advertise on TV. Cigarettes are legal. You don't advertise on TV. This is an adult product. You can't have an alcohol ad on before 8:30 at night. You're going to have sports bet ads on the 6 o'clock news, on MasterChef, on The Block, on Family Friendly Pro. Literally foreign-owned. Most of these sports betting companies have captured our game, NRL and AFL.
Tim, is the ban in the UK, the Premier League, was that a player-led ban, or was it done by the owners of the league?
It was player-led, and it was pressure, similar sort of pressure we're having here. I am stopped by parents who are total strangers in the street saying it's hard enough raising kids. You've got to stop these sports betting ads. Why are my kids seeing this? I say I'm trying. Same thing has been happening in Britain. Players particularly responded. So they are now way out ahead of the regulator who are trying to catch up.
Anywhere else in the world?
Belgium's banned all sports betting ads. Italy's banned all sports betting ads. Spain's banned all sports betting ads. You can still gamble. I'm a person who believes in adults' right and freedoms. But why should kids be seeing this?
Tim, the title of your talk was "We live in a community, not an economy." It looks, for what you're saying, it sounds like we live in an economy, not a community. So, because it looks like the desire whatever drives addiction, it's probably because I might get more money. So what do you think needs to be done that, the society becomes more a community where people are looking after each other, etc., rather than trying to earn more money?
So we know from way before COVID that Australians are joining less community groups, volunteering less, giving less to charities. We know that there's fragmentation going on at every level. Andrew Lee, who's the Minister for Communities and Charities, has written books about how social capital, connection, community, volunteering, service is literally the glue that holds the public good together. And it's fraying, it's fragmenting. We know that this dominant story of the richer I am, the happier I'll be, therefore GNI, gross national income, always growing means I'll be happier, actually isn't true. It's just not true. So I think when I speak, and I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding tonight, and when I hear conversations in cafes, a lot of Australians are very aware of this. They're going, something's wrong with the way we're looking at the world. It's my McDonald's story. And my kids were looking at a name tag in a different way to me. What we can do is join, volunteer, talk, ring up, talk back radio, write letters, say we are a community. And I don't care how much dollars NRL's getting, those sports bet ads have to go. That is just greed. They always will say with sport, the sky will fall in, we'll lose money. We used to have the Benson and Hedges cricket, do you remember? When tobacco, and it was a 25-year fight there, were on the nose, cricket said, there won't be cricket. We won't be able to show it on TV if we lose this sponsorship. We got rid of tobacco, the sky didn't fall in. We used to have the Foster's AFL Premiership Cup. Same thing. Shouldn't have a adult product, beer sponsoring it. The AFL said the sky will fall. It didn't. They're running the same argument. It's always this market greed argument over what belongs to the community. NRL, AFL, sport, kids' minds, junior sport. We need to join. We need to volunteer. We need to talk. We need to speak up. Just saying, this is a community. I don't care what you say the money is.
Tim, I'm going to try and sneak in too, but maybe I won't be able to. The new regime now with sports advertising, you have to have a slogan at the end that says, you win some but you lose more, or what could you be spending this money on otherwise? I'm guessing that's a sop in some ways. Is there any evidence that that's having any positive effect?
Well, it's much better than gamble responsibly. So we've been lobbying to get rid of that and convince the government to bring these in. So my judgment on it is better, but with a tsunami of wall-to-wall ads, it will become wallpaper. Even though they're quite good taglines, like what are you gambling with, and you lose more than you win, and they're much better. They're not blaming the individual like gamble responsibly. They will become wallpaper because we've just got far too much.
And is the mainstream media, where does the mainstream media generally stand? Are they bought out as well, or is there some moral compass there that can be helpful to these campaigns?
The Sydney Morning Herald were magnificent in prosecuting the cashless card. I don't know if from January on you were following the Herald at all, but they were good. I did have a chat to the owner of the Sydney Morning Herald, the chair of Channel 9, that they could go hard. His name is Peter Costello, because they were worried they were going out on a limb. This is the irony in the election. This really makes me laugh. In my politics, I'm more left of centre, everyone knows that. The right of centre media, the Telly and the Australian, were cheering on Chris Minns. There was Chris Kenny in the Australian saying, Minns is right, he's taken a right of centre position, not interfering with pokies. He deserves to win. The left of centre papers, the 9 papers, Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian, Crikey, we're all cheering on Dom Perrottet. Now go figure. Go figure. Well, I'll make it simple. The tally gets 1.5 million in advertising from Clubs New South Wales. The Ben Fordhams do always. The Clubs New South Wales gigs paid, $100,000 to be the MC. So it comes down to follow the money, really.
Thanks. Thanks for your stamina, Tim, in sticking with this over how many years? Just following the kids theme here, it's more and more prevalent on social media, etc., that kids' games are imitating or mimicking pokies. We're starting to hear about it. Do you want to share anything you've heard about it, please?
Yeah, what happens to people who develop gambling addictions is they go bankrupt or they go to jail. And the industry's always known that, so they always are looking to the next generation. And what the pokies industry have done with the gaming people is developed loot boxes, they're called, and prizes, which are just games, but are absolutely replicating the whole pokies random reward theory and addiction. We've just had loot boxes, the minister announcing at a federal level in gaming they're going to ban those for kids. But that's exactly what the gaming industry in hand with, because the gambling industry is just so cashed up. The advertising last year from sports betting was $280 million. Far more than Harvey Norman, any other advertiser in Australia, because it works. And kids are seeing that and they're thrilled about that. It's now gamble with your mates, so we own community. If you look at those ads, we own community again. It's what the pokies have done. This is your community centre. This is really a corruption of community and a corruption of kids.
I feel a bit embarrassed to be asking this question because I'm showing my incredible naivety. But can you explain to me the mechanics of how the gaming industry puts it over the politicians? I mean, I get that there are some politicians who are just inherently corrupt, but most politicians I've met on both sides of politics are fundamentally pretty decent people wanting to make the world a better place. But they're obviously all terrified of the gaming industry and the pubs and clubs. But what's the mechanics of how that is done?
So it's inducement and fear. Inducements are, because Clubs New South Wales are a not-for-profit, they aren't caught with donations. So they can donate massively to either side. Chris Minns was forced when Gerard Hayes, the Secretary of the Health Services Union, came out on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald 2 months ago to say, our members are sick of this, pokies are carving up the community, I'm for the cashless card. He was forced to quickly do a foot shuffle and say, from now on, Labor won't take donations from New South Wales clubs. I don't know if you remember reading that. I know, because I know people on the inside, that his initial thing was, we'll only not take donations from the mini casinos, those clubs that have 650 machines or more. And he was told that looks stupid, and you got to ban it from all, clubs. So that happened. So that inducement is actually a good reform, quite apart from not getting a cashless card so far. Getting a ban on donations is huge, because they are so cashed up. The second thing they can do inducements-wise, and this is fear and inducement, is mobilise club members. They say to club members, when Gillard tried to bring in the cashless card in 2010, they ran what's called the Un-Australian campaign. They said to our club members, they're going to take away your cheap Palmer. They're going to take away your cheap beer. They mobilised tens of thousands. It was so hysterical. Peter Garrett, who was then a minister, and I were to debate Alan Jones at the Rabbitohs Club. They had clubs so stirred up, hatred, fear, loss of our club, that the federal police rang Garrett and me and ordered us not to come. They said, we cannot protect you. They are so rabid. So they can mobilise people. See, that database where we all signed in today is fantastic. It's just a database to say you're going to lose your club, you're going to lose your Palmer. This is what a socialist government, it was Gillard that time, this time it was Dom Perrottet, so both sides have had a go of a reform of cashless card. So, and then it's simply what you'd call schmootzing to any local member. Oh yeah, we'll put on a free meeting for, you know, your Labor branch and a free meal, and you know, we'll donate. Which groups in the community do you say, you know, need a bit of help? Yeah, we'll donate to that. So it's, and here in New South Wales, because you've marinated in this club culture, and clubs are good. You know, I support clubs. Clubs are great. But you've marinated in them for so long, you haven't actually seen what's going on in terms of pokies. Two figures for you that might surprise you. 20% of New South Wales clubs have no pokies, and they're doing fine. I was down at Petersham Bowl, you might have seen it on the project, Channel 10. Got rid of their pokies, shot ahead. 40% of pubs in New South Wales have no pokies. I think your local pub is fantastic. I support that. It can be a great community. 40% don't have pokies. This has always been a completely unlevel playing field. And the Board of New South Wales Clubs is made up only of the presidents, or whatever they call them, CEOs, of the mini casinos. Because they're not, I call them mini casinos, because they're not a club with, 20 machines. They've got 650 machines. They're a casino in the suburbs. They're the ones who've run the whole agenda and intimidated politicians, and that's what Josh Landis was doing until he overstretched and attacked Perrottet's religion and had to be sacked. Even Chris Minns called for his sacking then because, as Dom said, I'm attacked for pokies reform because it comes from my Catholic gut. He was on 2GB. Imagine if I was a different religion and they were attacking me. Would that person still be in a job? Josh Landis was gone by the end of the day. But they play hard. They really, and they have so much money. That's how they've done it.
Tim, would you say that the clubs have some hold over their major churches as well, because you don't necessarily hear the objections from the major churches very publicly?
So until Stu Cameron came to Wesley, Reverend Stu Cameron, I didn't have a partner up here in New South Wales. When I talked to other church leaders, archbishops and others, oh, Tim, we love our clubs. I said, well, I love clubs too, but it's the pokies. One, it was marinating, so no church. Stu Cameron came from Adelaide. When he came in here, he's at Wesley Central Mission in Sydney, Pitt Street Mission. He goes, my gosh, look at this. And he's been very, very courageous. Wesley are a big outfit. They have tens of millions of dollars of contracts with the state government. They knew that in criticising Minns for not having a policy on this, except for, the ridiculous 500 machines, which is a Clubs New South Wales kick into the long grass policy, that they could lose contracts at Wesley. He was the first church leader that stood up. Look, to be really blunt, and Dom and I have had this conversation, so I'll tell you, couldn't get any buy-in from Catholic churches on this. They have big pokies clubs, and went to different leaders of very fine Catholic organisations, welfare organisation, went to the CEOs, oh, Tim, oh, we don't take on the clubs, oh. When Josh Landis attacked Dom Perrottet, Josh is Jewish and he had a tin ear. I don't think he'd noticed that Catholics actually weren't really standing up at all on this issue. But when he attacked Dom for his Catholic gut, suddenly the Catholics, for sectarian reasons you might say, were part of the campaign. But your question's a really astute one. The churches have been pretty silent and captive here.
Thanks so much, Tim. Just a question. We have a fabulous community pub near us, which we love, and they sponsor lots of local sporting teams and always enjoyed them. But they have a licence to close at midnight, but their VIP room is licensed to open at till 3 a.m. How does that happen? Why does that happen? And how do we accept that in our community?
Yeah, no, thank you. You've just pointed out exactly what I've been saying about the utter, total double standard. So those 40% of pubs that don't have pokies have to close at midnight. It's never been a level playing field. The pokies industry in the AHA, Australian Hotels Association, has always been, like Clubs New South Wales, so strong, so dominant, they get what they want. Basically, you have in New South Wales 24-hour pokies access. Even if this one closes, there's one down the street that's open from 3 a.m. to 5. And it's a complete failure by the New South Wales regulator. That's all it is, a complete and utter failure. It shouldn't be happening, just should not be happening.
I've just got a final question, Tim. After the last federal election with the seats won by the Teals, I felt a sense of hope that there had been, firstly, community speaking more than they had before, and they had been showing, as Viv said, some moral courage because they were speaking about against things that had been stalemates for years. So, and their strategy was around the kitchen table talks and a whole lot of other things. Are there things that we can learn from that sort of approach to approach the gambling issues that you've talked about, or other things that we can build on that community voice, not just for politics but for other things that you can see that may be learnings that could be applied?
One of the great community organisers in America, Saul Alinsky, had a book. When I die, don't mourn, organise. And that's what the Teals did. Around kitchen tables, they organised. They said, hell, this is our community after all. And the two-party system, and you've got to be silent and loyal to get pre-selected, and then silent and loyal to become a minister. They won't speak out for things that are happening here. They organised, and federally, they almost got the balance of power. I think it was very, very hopeful. I think meetings like this can then ask themselves the question, if there are people here who want to organise, who want to get around a kitchen table and say, what can we do? We at the Alliance for Gambling Reform, you can go to our website, have a whole lot of things you can do. A heap of tools and things you can do. So don't mourn, organise.
I mean, just to follow up that, and this could be controversial, but one of the things that the NRA has been very good at is organising. And now I know they've got a hell of a lot of money behind them, but are there even lessons that we could learn from them about this?
They've been the best organised. I say, you might have heard me say this on radio, if America's blind spot is guns, it is. Ours is gambling. The rest of the world looks at us and they simply can't believe it. When the committee that interviewed Lachlan Murdoch after the News of the World, do you remember that interview where I think he was married to Wendy Deng and someone tried to throw a punch and she stood up and defended him? Remember, that came out and interviewed me. They were looking at what they called, their words, the Australian disaster of gambling, because they wanted to avoid it. with their fruit machines, as they call them in England, pokies. And they asked me, so how much revenue does the Victorian government get from pokies? I said 14% of its budget. They would not believe me. They said, no, that figure's wrong. I said, excuse me, why? They said, well, that figure's wrong. I said, why? They said, well, no government would be that irresponsible. That's what they said to me. It was Tom Watson, who's the Labor MP and been Speaker, and they simply could not believe how our politics had been captured here. The NRA have organised. They have organised, and they have tied their message into a freedom message, which Ball and Landis were bringing back. It's our freedom, we're adults, we'll do what I like, we'll carry our gun. And the freedom message, the liberty message is very strong in America. It resonates here too. But, I think here, when you put an overlay of where the pokies are mostly, with the postcodes that they're in, it is very dramatic. They're all in the poorest postcodes. This is sheer predatory behaviour, transferring money from the poorest to the captains of industry. There aren't many postcodes in Toorak or Wallara or some of those, many pokies in Toorak or Wallara. So I think organising is really important.
Well, thank you very much for tonight, Tim. I think that one of the lessons from tonight resonates with the Newcastle Institute in that we started in 2004. Can you believe that, Ross? In that we tried to organise because of frustration of the level of political debate in Newcastle, which was polarised and can still be polarised, but we wanted to have respectful debate about public policy. It's a type of organisation, not quite the same as some of the things that you've talked about, but I guess we think it's really important, and we think that this sort of approach of having that respectful discussion is valuable. And we really appreciate your contribution tonight on the sense of community and some of the things that have led to the corruption of that you've talked about. I have to say you might be challenged for being one of our national treasures, because at our last meeting someone was nominated that spoke here, and she's here tonight and asked the question about moral courage and said that someone said Viv should be another national treasure. Sure. Sorry to embarrass you, Viv, but I thought it was sort of common that both of you could be that way. So thank you. We certainly appreciate everybody coming tonight. It's a great turnout for people to come to these events, particularly when we're still going through a pandemic. We really appreciate it. So please join with me in thanking Tim for his presentation tonight. On a different matter, at our May event, which I think is the 10th of May, we're going to be having the issue of making the criminal and justice system in relation to sexual assault fit for purpose for the 21st century. So we'll have a range of people on the panel, Kathy Lumby, who has spoken here before, and some legal representatives to discuss that issue, which I think is something that we certainly need to address and bringing it into the 21st century. So we would welcome people to come along to that, to spread the word about it, sit around kitchen tables of your neighbours and tell them about that sort of event. We also would welcome other people to join the Newcastle Institute. If they want to get involved in the committee in organising these events, we certainly always welcome new blood coming into our events. So thank you again for coming tonight, and please join me in thanking Tim once more.